But when you work with a Chinese boss, you barely hear like small talk. They were direct going to the conversation about the work. So basically like, can you get this done? What you just change 1, 2, 3. I need this by 5. It's very direct. I think that's also come like with my leadership style as well a little bit. Plus the thing I learned from like the Western culture, I can do small talk. I really enjoy this small talk thing because at the end of the day, if you have a good relationship with your coworker, with your like superior, with somebody reports to you, and then you can build like really nice work relationship.
Hi everyone, welcome to 北腔南调, aka Cultural Collision. I'm Melody.
I'm Victoria.
And today it's just us. It's been a while since Vic and I have done a solo episode, so we're excited for this one today. Between the two of us, we've worked in quite a few places and we've had colleagues around the world. And what we've realized is work culture really varies from country to country. And they're largely influenced by historical, social, and economic factors. So today we're going to be diving deep into the diverse work environments of China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and the United States. We'll go over work pacing, expectations, work styles, and communication in these 5 distinct regions, and how these cultures shape the way professionals interact, collaborate, and find their work-life balance. However, I must say, everything we say today is based off of our own experiences and perspectives, so please take everything with a grain of salt.
So from the fast-paced business hubs of Hong Kong, Beijing, and Singapore, where efficiency and ambition are paramount, to the disciplined work ethic and harmony-seeking approach of Taiwan will shed light on the cultural values that shape the work experiences of millions. With the rise of remote work, we'll also be discussing the traditional in-office setups that still thrive, and the increasingly popular hybrid modes that bridge the gap between the two. We'll discuss the advantages and challenges faced by professionals in each style and how organizations adapt to these diverse work environments. So let's begin. The first question I want to discuss is how would you describe the work pacing and expectations in China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and the United States?
Yeah, I'll start off with the United States. So that's where I first started experience in the workspace. I would say in the United States, they really value work-life balance. You know, you might work overtime sometimes, but you get paid for that. The time that you are dedicating and devoting to work is really on the clock. That's a big difference I found between my work experience in the United States and China, which is where I went immediately after the United States. So in Beijing, which is where I worked, I would say there's a little bit more gray area between work and life. I think there's a huge merge between work and life, to be exact. And I would say it's largely dependent on the app that we use to communicate with our friends and family, as well as with our colleagues. All of that communication is done through WeChat. And so it's really, really hard to differentiate your work as well as life. And in that sense, since you're always on this app, the expectation is that you would always respond to clients, you know, even if you're outside of work hours. So in that sense, there was no work-life balance in China.
I started my first job in Hong Kong. I worked for 1 year in Hong Kong because I work with my colleagues in Hong Kong. Like most of them are like local Hong Kong people. And back then, they really value the people who can speak we call 两文三语, like 2 language, 3 dialogue, right? Like English and Chinese and Mandarin, Cantonese and English. So back then it's really hard to study Cantonese, and how you able to communicate with your colleague, they basically just speak to each other in Cantonese. So if you don't speak this dialogue, it's really hard to live and also work in Hong Kong. But according to lifestyle or like work style, work-life balance, I think that highly depends on which industry you are in, right? So back then I was in the real estate industry, and I think I do have the work-life balance, and I had much fun because I have really good coworkers. They're really nice to me, and we were very close. And then I moved back to China. I worked in China for a long time. But the difference, I think, I barely worked in a purely Chinese company. All of my bosses are from the US. I only worked for like 3 months in a very, very short period in a startup company, like local Chinese company. I quit like in my probation because I can't really take this like how you work with other people. You always work like overtime, and other people, like if you leave on time, other people still there working, and if we're uncomfortable. So I think that really depends on like what kind of company you're working on, the industry and the people around like around you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Victoria on that. I think we're very fortunate that the companies that we worked for have not just like been purely local. Because like even though I've been in Asia now for the past 5, 6 years, all of the companies that I've worked for over here have also been foreign owned. So when I was in Beijing, my bosses were from the United States. My former company was based in Singapore. And then right now I'm in Taiwan, but the company's based in Hong Kong and my bosses are also from the States. So the work environment is definitely a lot more lenient and a lot more chill compared to that if we were to actually be working in like China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. However, because we are in Asia, I think there's a lot of external influences that would make the working environment internally also a little bit more fast-paced and a little bit more stressful. So for example, right now, I work for a company that's based in Hong Kong, and my bosses are from the States, and they're physically in the States as well right now. However, one of our biggest clients is a tech company that is in China. And so because we work with that client, the pacing has to be a little bit quicker when we do communicate with that client because they have really, really high demands and they have different expectations of us. And so I guess this comes to like our next point. Let's talk about work style and communication preferences in the different regions. So maybe, our experience of like work pacing and such is one way because we've both been working for like foreign companies. But when we work with like different colleagues around the world, or when we're working with clients who are from different countries, how have you navigated those differences? And are there any like special stories that you want to share with us?
So we used to be like coworkers. We work for a company, like headquarters is based in Singapore. We have three bosses, right? One from India, one from Australia, and one from Singapore, yeah. So so it's like it's really mixed work culture, but more like I think a leaning towards like India working culture. One thing I feel like similar for India working culture, also Chinese people, right? It also brings me my memory back when we were a colleague in Beijing. And I used to work for a boss from China, and her working style is really Chinese style. And she worked very hard. And she also pushed us to work very hard. And she gives a lot of challenge, and she wants us to be like, challenge yourself to be great at work. But I have to say by then, I don't really enjoy like work-life balance. Then I moved to this company, but I've been in this company for like almost 2 years. But the previous 1.5 is I work from home, I work remote, I work in China, but the headquarters is in Singapore. So I just moved to Singapore 3 months ago. I feel like it's so different. I feel like the life pace and the work pace is relatively a little bit slow than China, but like also I feel like because also it's a startup and tech company, and the pace is like, I remember we used to have this word of how we represent our current company's hustle. So you can imagine it's kind of like quite fast paced environment, but still I think no people really work during the weekends, and your boss, they barely like message you after work or like during the weekends. So you still can like, there's a separate line between work and life. And also like Melody's mentioned about like how you communicate with your friends and family, and also what tool you use to communicate with your coworker. So right now it's a separate tool. I feel like that's the like different culture in Singapore.
Oh my gosh, this really just like reminded me of something that happened yesterday. So, as I was saying before, we have a client that is a huge tech company that's based in China. And we've been communicating with them via email this whole week because there's a big project that's going to be launched in early September. And so we've been communicating about that. And yesterday, I sent out the final email on a Friday, and then they responded. It was like already 5 p.m. But then I didn't respond back after that 5 p.m. message because I was thinking like, okay, there's a couple links and stuff that I need to gather. So I'll probably just do that early next week, and I'll respond to that email on Monday when I'm back, even though it wasn't the end of the workday. And because I didn't respond, that client then messaged our group chat on WeChat so that we can respond. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy because, we have each other's contacts on Slack, email, and WeChat. And even though our official communication is through email, if they really, really want something, they would still push forward with it through WeChat. And like through WeChat, they know that you're going to be able to see that message. And I think that's like one of the biggest differences that I found, like working in China versus other countries. Like I think, the States or Singapore or Taiwan, these are the only other 3 places that I've worked at. I think they quite respect your work boundaries. That's kind of like the blur between work and life balance because you always can find a way to reach out to a person in China.
So how do you feel like professionals collaborate and interact with colleagues and their superiors? So what's your view on that? What's your experience on that?
I feel very fortunate in that out of all of the jobs that I've held, I've had really, really wonderful colleagues and I've had really, really wonderful bosses as well. I think it's just really important to maintain a good relationship with your colleagues, as well as superiors, as well as people that you manage, because at the end of the day, everybody's working on the same project and like has the same goal and vision for the organization at the overall, right? That's why you guys are working for the same company. So I wouldn't say that there's been any like challenges working with anybody, but in terms of like work style and communication, that is something that you definitely need to adjust to depending on their personalities, depending on kind of like their expertise and their strengths and weaknesses that they bring to this organization. But that just takes time for us to figure each other out. How about you?
A huge, like a very big difference between you have a Chinese boss and a foreigner boss. I think it's very different because I can remember how they talk to you, right? Especially like I had a lot of like foreign bosses, people from like the US, people from Canada. When they talk to you and they are going have like when you had one-on-one with them, I have like work one-on-one. The beginning always start with a small talk. And they will talk about you, how's your weekend, how's your week, how's your life, right? And then we dive into the work. And every time they ask you to do some work, they always show their appreciation or like, thank you, please. It use the word like that in the work. But when you work with a Chinese boss, you barely hear like small talk. They were direct going to the conversation about the work. So basically like, can you get this done? What you just change 1, 2, 3 and do it. I need this by 5. It's very direct. I think that's also come like with my leadership style as well a little bit. Plus the thing I learned from like the Western culture, I can do small talk because I think I really enjoy this small talk thing because at the end of the day, people have like, if you have a good relationship with a coworker, with your like superior, with somebody reports to you, and then you can build like very nice work culture, like work relationship.
Yeah, so I actually haven't had like a pure Chinese boss, but I have worked with Chinese colleagues and I do agree that they are more direct, especially when it comes to clients. Like when we work with clients, they're just like straight to the point. They just demand and they want X, Y, and Z. In the beginning, I would say it was a little alarming that there were so many demands, but after working in this environment for a while, I actually quite appreciated it. I don't think I would be able to handle it if that was kind of the work environment I had to be in on a day-to-day basis, where my boss was also talking to me like that. But when it comes to clients who are just stating very clear demands of what their needs are, I like it because it makes it very easy for me to kind of respond to those requests. And I'm not sitting there guessing what their needs are. Yeah. And so I think that is something that I quite appreciate about them, about like working with Chinese clients, even though sometimes it is quite difficult because, when they get angry, it's like they don't hide that at all. But then working with like maybe Americans or with Taiwanese, especially, they go around in circles and circles. And that's something that I feel very frustrated about, especially when there's like a deadline coming up and I feel like they're still trying to be very polite. And at the end of the day, things are not going to be met then. Some people don't mind that deadlines aren't going to be met. But for me, like that's something that I really really care about, efficiency. And I feel like time is wasted as a result. How about you, Victoria? Are there any like interactions with people in different countries where you feel like you appreciate or wish could change?
I think I also agree with Melody about like this characteristic of Chinese people, right? They are very direct. I think that's also like in my blood. So when I talk to people, I really be very strict or direct about what I want, what this should look like. For like if I go talk to designer, if I talk to other like colleagues, right? So we make sure we have the same goal. The goal is to let's work together, collaborate together to make this happen. But how you say it, I really appreciate how the Western culture like taught me is like use please a lot and say thank you a lot. Nobody do this for like I think we should always appreciate people, like always please ask them like politely to do the work and also show our appreciation, especially if they do a good job. But like that's barely see in the Chinese work, like Chinese working culture is really hard to see something like that. Also, I feel like I find a lot of similarity between the people in India, also in China. They are very direct. So they come to you and they will like ask you to do something. There's a one small like difference here is like I always get last minute request from my coworkers in India. I think it's their work culture. Sometimes you'll get this request from like the Chinese coworker as well, but not that often. I think like the India working culture is also like very fast paced and they work a lot and they work overtime. And sometimes they forgot like we don't have the same time zone and they don't care about what you are doing. You have another job. And if I want support from you, I'll just ask my demand.
Yeah, I agree that like for India, their work style and work culture is very fast paced as well. Oftentimes they would have an idea and then literally that afternoon they would start executing, mapping it out, and then coming up with designs. And then, that event or idea would be launched the following week. And so because of this like really fast paced, work style, though, I think one of the flaws in that is that they are not as detail oriented. I would say like a lot of the designs that we would see would have typos, colors wouldn't be as consistent. And if you're looking at the things with a very clear eye, I would say that it's not as neat. But I think that's something that maybe we care about more in the West or even in China. Like they care about all of these little details, but that wasn't something that I think I saw when I worked with colleagues from India.
Yeah, I totally agree. It brings my memory back. So when we used to work with like our colleagues in India. Oh, that's quite interesting though. A very special experience to work with like India colleagues. You and I both work like in Hong Kong, Taiwan, US, or like Singapore. How do these countries approach work-life balance? Are there any specific practices or policies in place to support employees in maintaining a healthy balance between their personal and professional lives?
I would say in the companies that I worked for that are US based, they really, really value a healthy equilibrium, especially our mental health. A lot of the companies would actually offer meditation classes or some kind of stipend for us to use outside of work. They really do value that work-life balance and offer you like benefits and opportunities outside of the work that you're doing itself. What would you say?
So, I work for a US startup company, like in education industry for like almost 5 years, right? When I used to talk my previous coworkers at that company, we all feel like very appreciative of our bosses, what they taught us. They really value like work hard, play hard culture. Each year they will take us to like very fancy French restaurant. And also they will trade us into a 5-star luxury hotel in Beijing. So because we work very hard in a certain period of time and people work like 10 hours or like even 12 hours a day, after that period, they willing to have like show us how to enjoy our life. We did a lot like retreat events, like staying in hotel and eat like luxury food and a lot of teamwork, like team building events. So in that job, I learned how to enjoy my life after work. I think that's something like you barely can have or like to learn from a for like a Chinese company or for like even for a Singapore company. I don't think the Southeast Asia countries they really value or like they teach you how to enjoy your life. They will think this is your personal life. You want to enjoy work-life balance. You want to reach this balance is your thing. But for that working experience, it really like taught me a lot and really appreciate how they show us how to enjoy our like life after work.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I also like think about the company I'm currently working for, right? They also provide something called flexible benefits. This flexible benefits can allows you to go to the gym. You can claim the fee you go to the gym. You can buy like you can go to the co-working space, you can claim this fee, and you can also do therapy and you can claim this fee like this money as well. And you can do facial to yourself, you can travel all this money. So each year we have a certain amount of money can give it to the employee. So if you treat yourself well, if you maintain your health, your mental health, I think that's come out a really good purpose to keep the employee have a healthy body and healthy like mental health, like mental stability during the COVID. I think that's a very like good approach to like how they care about their employees.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of companies in the United States also do something similar, especially like the big tech companies up in San Francisco. They would encourage their employees to do some kind of like active activity. So, for example, skiing and snowboarding or like rock climbing, and they would provide some kind of stipend for that as well. What they would also do is kind of like encourage their employees to embark on some kind of creative venture and sponsor that as well. And I think that's really, really smart because you're allowing your employee to learn outside of the company. And eventually they're probably going to be bringing that idea back to your own company. So I feel like it's a win-win. Like companies should definitely invest in their employees because if you give, you'll be given rewards back as well.
Yeah, what you just talk about reminds me. I had a conversation with a friend who works in Bloomberg in Singapore, and they have this benefits. It's very interesting. You can go to pick up trash during workday at the beach. You can go to plant a tree during the work week. You can do charity during the work days. And also like I think every other Friday afternoon, they get off work at 3 p.m. and they go out together to have a drink. And it's really good bonding for like coworkers because like you have happy employee, you have a happy, like have a good performance. That is very good for like the company. So I think that work culture is very healthy and very people like really enjoy working there.
That's so fun. I want to plant a tree too.
I know.
We talked a lot about like the different work dynamics in countries around the world, but let's talk about something that has happened in the recent years, remote work. So I've been working remote for a really, really long time now, not even hybrid because I'm not even close to where my offices are. So I'm super used to remote now. But before, when I was in Beijing, because of the pandemic, it ended up being kind of hybrid. But before that, it was like just purely in office. Victoria, you've also experienced all three modes of traditional in office, remote working, and then right now you're doing hybrid as well. So, do you want to talk about like what your thoughts are on these three different work styles and what you feel like are the key factors in driving the adoption or resistance in each of these three different options?
I think before COVID, I think remote working style or like hybrid is very new term for all of us. So only thing we know is just like work in the office every single day, go out to 5 days a week and you to go to office from like 9 to 6, right? I don't think like something special about it until during the COVID. We start working from home for the whole week. And then when the COVID is getting better, right? We are starting to go back to office 2 days a week and 3 days a week. And then some company go back to normal 5 days a week and some company just do like 3 days a week. So now I work 3 days a week in office and 2 days work remote. So I kind of like enjoy this like hybrid thing. So the one thing I enjoy most at the company is we can have work lunch together. We can bond our like relationship gets better. And also something I really enjoy is when you work both working in the office, something you want to check with this person, and you just grab them and ask one question. It can be very quick. So if you work remotely, you ask something online, probably they get a long time to get back to you. Sometimes it gets slower. What about you?
Yeah, I wish that I could be in a hybrid working environment at the moment, but I just don't want to live in a different place right now as well. So because of that, I have to be remote. But if there is like the perfect opportunity where I actually enjoy the place where my company is based, I would choose to do hybrid because it gets really lonely sometimes when I'm just doing remote work by myself. I also, have to really just be disciplined and sit myself down to actually do the work. There's no colleague motivating me, it's just texting back and forth, and there's not much of a community. You have to be really proactive and create that community yourself, reach out to people in order to schedule meetings. And that's kind of like the coffee chat that you can have with other people. So I do wish that I could be in a hybrid working environment so that work could be a little bit more efficient when, your colleagues right next to you and you can just poke them and ask for a favor. Also, I miss just like randomly being able to have meals with your colleagues, but I definitely cannot see myself going back to the traditional in office where you're just like clocking in and out 9 to 6 every single day. Our episode is coming to an end, so let's end with our last 3 questions. What is your advice, Victoria, for someone who's interested in working in another country?
I think it's very hard. Especially in the beginning. You move to a new country, right? You don't have friends and you don't have family and you have your support system in this whole new country. I think just give yourself some time to adjust to everything around you, and try to make friends with your colleagues, and they will bring their friends to you. Try to experience whatever this country bring to you. And this is something new. Try to enjoy. Sometimes it can be hard, but give it some time, and you don't have to dedicate yourself spending 1, 2, 3, or maybe 5 or 10 years in this country. So you can just be there and see if you like it or not, and don't give yourself too many constraints and think too much about it. For you, Melody, are there any cross-cultural practices or approaches that can enhance productivity and foster better collaboration on a global scale?
I think this is a really good question because our world is just getting more global. People are doing more business with people around the world, and with technology, it's just so easy to do this. So I feel like everyone at some point in time will be working with somebody from a different country. For this, I would say read books, watch videos, or listen to podcasts to understand what their cultural practices are, because every single country and every culture is so different. But at the same time, get to know who you are collaborating with, because each individual is also very different. And we can't really generalize a whole population based off of the small interactions that maybe Vic and I have had with people in these different countries that we stated today. And so at the end of the day, I think communication is key. Getting to know who your audience is, aka who your colleague is important in order for you guys to foster better collaboration.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a really good advice.
So I guess this is for both of us. Which country do we want to work in next?
I think I mentioned this before to Melody. I think if I have the opportunity, I want to go to Europe and work there for, I don't know, 1 or 2 years or a couple years or a couple months. I'm not sure, but that's my dream, or something I want now. So I don't know if that's gonna change in a certain period of time, but that's something I'm looking forward to. What about you?
That's so exciting. I am looking towards the United States now. I've been in Asia, as stated before, for 5, 6 years now, and I think it's time to return home. But it's not going to happen this year. I'm kind of manifesting it out into the world and hoping that 2024 will be the year.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our solo episode today. It's been great to just be you and me, right?
I know. I feel good too.
Cool. Well, thank you so much to our listeners for joining us today. If you have any topics that you would like us to discuss in the coming weeks, feel free to comment on any of our social platforms, and we'll see you again next Wednesday. Chat soon. Bye.
Bye.